Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today by the gracious invitation of the French Gendarmerie at their Central Ballistics Lab. We're taking a look at some of the very cool French rifles that they have here. Today, we have a FAMAS Valorisé, or improved model. This is the result of essentially it's the Felon program, which was the infantry equipment and integrated equipment and communications program, or Fantasson d'équipement et liaison intégrée. The concept, this was released in 1995, was essentially very similar to the US Objective Force Warrior or Future Force Warrior. They were Army modernization programs, and the main point of Felon was to add a really multi-purpose integrated computer system to the FAMAS rifle. It was thermal, it had a video link in it, it would, you could convey, you could see the view through the scope on a helmet camera, you could transmit it to other people in the squad, you could hold the rifle around a corner and see on your video monitor what the scope was seeing. A lot of computational power, but it was in a package that was really pretty large and clunky. This photo is a little bit of a goofy joke because we have put every single possible element on the gun, but you can see what that Felon scope is, that main body of the scope. Now, in order to do this, the regular FAMAS wasn't really going to work because here's your regular FAMAS. There is no really good way to attach an optic to it. There were kludged ways to attach an optic to it, but that would have put that Felon scope like way up here and impractically high. So what they did instead was Nexter, which was the company that had essentially inherited the Saint-Étienne arsenal, they developed the lowered or improved version of the FAMAS, where they took that optics mount, dropped it down, gave it a solid Picatinny rail, and this would serve as the base for the Felon optic. Now, you may notice that this looks quite a bit different from that picture that I showed you. That's because the Felon system also had a vertical front grip in it with an integrated control switch pad. Well, in addition to having the whole Felon system, they realized we can also just have this improved lowered upper that we can easily mount, say, a red dot to, and we can pair that with the original FAMAS F1 lower and have a rifle that's actually fairly handy and optics integrated. And that is essentially what the FAMAS Valorisé is. So let's take a closer look. Let me show you what they did to the internals to make this happen. All right. To do this conversion, the basic action of the gun remained completely unchanged. In fact, you can see here the serial number on this. It's a C series standard F1. This is a standard Army production rifle. It has just had a V for Valorisé, or improved, added to it. The magazines remain the same, so they are still the proprietary FAMAS magazine. This can't really easily be adapted to Stanag magazines because the FAMAS mag doesn't have a bolt hold open in it, so it's a little bit shorter than a regular AR mag, and as a result, you can't just kludge an AR mag into this without making brand new receivers. Now, they did that for the FAMAS G2, which was largely intended for export sales and largely didn't get any, but the French Army had 300,000 or 400,000 FAMASs manufactured, and it would not have been feasible, it wouldn't have been cost effective for them to try and rebuild them all with new receivers to use a different magazine, when they already had a lot of these mags in stock. Anyway, so it's a 25-round mag. Now, originally, the FAMAS was made with a 1 in 12-inch twist barrel, which is pretty common of pre-NATO standardization rifles, and that was designed for 55-grain ammunition. Well, then, later on, the NATO standardizes on the 62-grain Belgian cartridge, and all of a sudden, the old rounds don't, like the old barrels, don't work with the new cartridges. This is what led to the M16A2 in the US. The FAMAS G2 also had a fast twist barrel. When they built the Valorisé, they did in fact order barrels from Beretta, and they are 1 in 7-inch twist barrels. So the Valorisé will run 62 grain and the other slightly heavier 5.56 ammunition. So obviously we have our Picatinny rail here, which is fixed solidly to the receiver and free floated from the barrel. I'll show you that in a moment. They also added a small section of Picatinny up front for a laser. In order to have this piece added, they had to do a bit of redesign to the front end of the rifle, which included having to move the bipod legs back a little bit, about 1 or 2 inches. Now, if you were to take the normal bipod leg and just move it back, the bipod foot would interfere with the ejection port. So they then put a dogleg cant in the bipod legs. In fact, the bottom end here is plastic. What they did was make a new bottom half of the bipod and attach it to cut down original bipod legs on top, so that now you've got that leg hanging under the ejection port where it won't get in the way. The fire control here is still the same as the regular FAMAS, so we have a selector switch on the back of the rifle that swaps between 3-round burst and unlimited full auto. And then we have the selector switch in the trigger guard that allows you to select between semi-auto, 1, and repetition, or full auto, this being either 3-round burst or unlimited full auto, whatever you set on the back of the gun. Now, the original FAMAS had an ambidextrous top charging handle here, and this whole thing here is actually a protective shroud for the charging handle. Pro tip, that's actually why the AR-15 has a carry handle on it as well. It's just they got rid of the top charging handle on the AR and never updated the rest of the upper receiver design. Since the Valorisé is adding a Picatinny rail, they can't have a charging handle sticking up, so what they did instead was essentially just bend it off to the side. So you now have a non-ambidextrous charging handle. Still works the exact same way. The front sight is the same, but it has also been moved back to allow this piece of rail for the laser. The rear sight has been modified a bit, again, so that it doesn't obstruct your Picatinny rail and optic. You have a flip-up small aperture, and then you have a secondary flip-up here, which is your grenade launching sight. So you have ranges for the grenades, and you also have an aperture there, which is identical to, well, it's a little bit larger than, but it's in the same position as the aperture for the regular rifle shooting. So if you're using the grenade launcher, you do have a rifle sight right there as well at the same time. At the front end, we have the same muzzle device. They have gotten rid of the adjustable grenade range segments on the barrel. So again, on the original FAMAS, we have these grooves in the barrel, and they're numbered down here, and that allows you to set range on your rifle grenades. The Valorisé got rid of that feature. It has just a fixed rear rifle grenade retention ring here, so you can still use rifle grenades. And then they have fitted it with a literal bolt-on bayonet lug behind that. The original FAMAS used a bayonet with 2 rings that would slip over both of these to lock in place. With the Valorisé, you're now fitting a standard American bayonet. If you are familiar with the FAMAS, you know that disassembly is super easy. We're just going to take out this one pin, which will allow us to take off the upper handguard, except it's a little more complicated here. And frankly, this upper plastic piece is really pretty crummy. It's very fragile, very flexible. And it's actually held in place by 2 little pins up here. And to remove it, we're actually going to grab this and just squeeze it together and lift it out like that. And then the rear sections are not attached to each other. They just slide under the buttstock here. I pop these out from there. We have to finagle this off around the charging handle, and then finally we can take that off. So this thing is probably the worst part of the Valorisé. I guess the fortunate side is it doesn't have to actually do anything. It's just there to cover the rest of the internal parts, but man, that is not a great piece. Going back to the original FAMAS once again, we have this tube that's fixed to the receiver. The top handguard and bipod fit onto this nut. Your charging handle, your rear sight are both fitted onto this tube, which is not connected to the barrel. So if you look at the front here, you can see the barrel is free-floated inside that tube. To do the Valorisé, they essentially extended that tube out. Take off the one bipod leg so you can see in there a little more easily. What they have done is bolt on an extension. So you've got 2 hex bolts here. This front extension is now clamped, is now bolted all the way back to the receiver by way of this tube. So it has the laser mount, it has the front sight now. This is all fixed independent of the barrel. You can see the similarities in the original parts between like this block right here, and this block right here. They've just added this upper assembly for the Picatinny rail to it. And they've taken what was this spring-loaded catch on the bolt handle, which remains right here. This one's not quite, there we go, now it's all the way closed. And they have added this side-mounted charging handle to it, again, with a couple of bolts. See the bolts on that side as well. On the original FAMAS, the bipod is mounted to the handguard, and this lug right here hooks it onto the receiver barrel tube assembly, which essentially makes it free-floated, which is all it needs to be. Since they were adding an extension to the front of that receiver tube on the Valorisé, what is nice is they went ahead and added the bipod mount to it, so you now actually have a little bit of cant available in the bipod, which you didn't have on the original FAMAS. If you aren't familiar with the rest of FAMAS disassembly, well, you should go watch some of my other videos on the FAMAS, but since you're here already, we'll just go ahead and take this one apart. So we've got the buttstock there with a recoil buffer assembly in it. I then have one captive pin here that I can push out that allows me to remove the whole fire control group. Got our 3-round burst cam in the back. We have another captive pin right here holding the bolt in place. I just push that out using the push pin, and then the bolt comes off, and then the bolt carrier comes off. Then I can take out the accelerator lever and the firing pin and the bolt. If you want to get really fancy, you can take out the ejector extractor assembly as well by pulling that little pin. That's what you would do if you want to switch this from left to right hand. And then you can remove the bipod legs by rotating them up to about that position. And they come off. And there you have a fully field-stripped FAMAS Valorisé. Was this a good project? To my mind, yes. It has certainly had its pros and its cons. Not all the elements of the conversion were the highest quality, this in particular. And not all of them were done in the most elegant manner. Had this been a ground-up design, things would have been a lot cleaner, but it wasn't. It was a conversion program, and so there are some compromises that had to be made. These rifles were purchased. There were, I believe, 20,000 Beretta barrels purchased. 18,500 Felon rifles were budgeted, were acquired. The Valorisé was never really a mass issue rifle. For conscripts, for the general mass of the army, the rifle remained the standard FAMAS F1. That guy, until it was replaced a couple of years ago by the HK 416F. So this was sort of a specialty thing. You would see them every once in a while around, but they were never particularly common. There weren't that many of them manufactured. The soldiers I've spoken to who used these often complained about their fragility. Like, you saw what they had to do to this upper plastic to make it fit the new layout, and it is, in fact, very fragile, clunky, awkward. They didn't really like the charging handles either. It was a rifle with really a mixed reception, but it did allow the FAMAS to more or less enter the modern age with a proper optics mount. And to my mind, had they not gone to the 416F, this would have kind of been the obvious pattern to upgrade the FAMAS rifles to. Like, if you wanted to keep the FAMAS in service, this is how you would do it. Maybe you could come up with a better system for the upper plastic, but that would have been the way forward. Anyway, big thanks to the Gendarmerie for giving me access to this one to take a look at. They're, needless to say, quite scarce today, as they were never made in large numbers, and now they're being phased out completely. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.